呢邊撳呢邊撳壓住佢，你試下。嗱，你試下壓住佢，唔係咁樣。
What's up, everyone? After last week's video on basic Chinese knife skills, we had a bunch of additional questions come up, so this is a fun follow-up interview that we did with Daddy Lau. My dad's been a Chinese chef for over 50 years and has owned the same two knives for several decades, so he has a ton of experience to share about how to properly use and care for Chinese knives to ensure that they'll last you a lifetime. As always, you'll be able to read a recap of all the tips and tricks in this interview on our blog at madewithlao.com. And as a preface, my dad's perspective is one of many voices in a chorus of all the different ways you can care for your knives. I've linked to our blog post and a few other great resources on knives in our description. Hope you guys enjoy!
So 我仲有啲問題想問你，
講問咩嘢？
你係咪喺美國到美國嗰時先買呢個把刀啊？
係啊，
係咪買嚟做工啊？
係啊，買做工，屋企都要用啦。
所以你去餐館，你係用呢個把刀啊？
喺人哋嘅餐館就用出人哋嘅餐館啲刀。我哋以前做餐館嘅時用佢啦，收尾唔做餐館咪我攞翻嚟屋企用咯。啊，呢啲刀都係以前喺自己餐館做用嘅，後嚟冇做佢做餐館咪拎翻嚟自己屋企做咯。
你記唔記得係幾貴啊？
呢個應該係25蚊到啦，呢把刀都好似係30年、70幾年前嘅咯，大過你咗刀咯呢個。我哋做餐館都分開啲刀用咩嘅，我哋好錫啲刀嘅，你知道嘛？做餐館係非常愛錫把刀嘅，呢個刀係切嘅就愛嚟切嘅，我嚟斬親呢啲刀咧就會崩親呢啲，就冇咗呢個咩啦？呢啲都唔同啦，呢啲可以咁樣斬就得。嗱，
呢個係硬啲啊，
呢個厚啲、重啲。嗱，你斬摸下，呢個柄係鐵嘅，呢個柄係咁嵌入去嘅，唔同咁用。啲刀分開係點樣做？好似你呢啲刀都唔同咁樣用嘅啫。你個大嘅刀用切唔同，細嘅刀同細嘅刀又唔同咁做。呢啲刀又唔同啦。嗱，呢刀咧切番茄啊，切咩都 OK 呢啲啦。但係呢啲咧，如果你唔識切番茄咧，你呢刀你就切唔到啦。你係我就或者切得到，你就唔識切得到。嗱，就咁啦。刀咧就每張刀嘅用途都唔同嘅，特別係你如果係西餐咧，做西餐咧都好多刀，呢張刀做乜？呢啲刀就分開晒。你好似我哋做中國餐館嘅刀都係一樣，呢啲切嘅就切嘅，呢啲斬嘅斬嘅，分開嘅。明嘛？
你點知道如果你唔用得個刀啊？
除非你柄斷咗啦，呢個柄斷咗咪唔用得咯。除非就斷咗就唔用得啦。如果唔係咧，我可以磨翻佢嚟嘅。如果佢覺得佢切得唔好啊，我就可以磨翻佢。
OK， 咁我想問你點樣？好似呢個啦，呢個係叫咩啊？
磨刀棍。
餐
館你叫做磨刀棍嚟嘅。
你會唔會用呢個？定係多數用？
餐館多數都用呢個，但係佢唔可以磨得好薄。佢之後點係咁輕輕揩攞個刀鋒出嚟。咁樣磨嘅。佢唔可以好似呢啲刀咁磨到好利、好薄。呢啲刀咧之後呢條棍咧好似攞個刀鋒出嚟。譬如你覺得切得佢唔係咁好嘅話咧，你就攞餐館多數都有呢隻。間間餐館都有呢啲。
但係餐館唔用呢個啊？
用呢個同呢個用法唔同。呢個咧，呢個刀呢個石咧分咗兩邊嘅，呢邊同呢邊嘅用法唔同。呢邊咧就滑啲嘅，呢邊咧就粗啲，冇咁滑嘅。如果你把刀太過係真係好唔利啦，咁你就用呢邊粗嘅磨完之後咧，用粗嗰個磨完之後咧，就再用呢個滑嘅磨翻，攞翻個鋒利。
咁你一開始係用個冇咁滑個。
如果你覺得把刀係需要呢邊磨嘅咧，你就用呢邊。
呢個冇咁滑。
呢個冇滑就磨去即係去得可以磨得快啲、薄啲。但係呢邊咧先至真正攞到把刀利。攞個刀鋒。攞刀鋒，把刀利唔利咧？就靠個鋒。如果你磨完把刀翻嚟咧，試下隻手指甲就知道佢利唔利，有冇刀鋒喺度啦。 我啲刀經常都係派咗手甲打落手指下啦，唔會嘅，咁就把刀就嚟啦，就好有鋒利啦。
Like some of you watching, I was a little freaked out the first time I saw my dad put a knife on his fingernail, but it actually is one of the most convenient and effective ways to test sharpness. You've probably seen people testing out their knives by slicing paper. However, this is actually pretty easy to do even with a fairly dull knife, whereas that same dull knife would glide across your fingernail. And practically speaking, as long as you're careful, it's a lot easier to use your nail than it is to find a piece of paper, especially if you're a busy chef in a restaurant like my dad.
磨刀嘅時候咧，隻手要咩？要好定，落啲少少水落去嗱。
Adding water generally acts as a sort of lubricant for the friction that's produced as we sharpen the knife against the stone. The water mixes together with the loose particles from the stone and the knife to create a slurry, which helps to further polish the knife's edge and sharpen the blade. My dad was also saying that in certain cases, the water helps reduce some of the frictional heat, which helps to avoid any potential warping that might occur.
一定隻手唔好咁樣反嚟翻，即係一直隻手定喺度。呢邊咧斜斜地嘅，聽到嘛？呢邊係斜斜地，聽到嘛？呢邊係平嘅，知道嘛？磨刀咧一定係要係咁樣啦，特別係斬個刀，我哋斬個刀一定係要咁樣。
係點解唔係有啲刀係兩邊係
新嘅刀就我多數都係咁，兩邊係咁樣。但係你如果我自己做工做開咧，呢邊一定係斜斜地嘅嗱。但係呢邊嘅時候咧，我就放平嘅油嘅，平啲油嗱，平啲係咪？嗱，睇到嘛？咁平啊嘛，平唔同啦，係嘛？呢邊咧就同呢邊唔同啦。你磨完呢邊粗嘅咧，你又反轉嘅，過嘅呢邊。嗱，又一直咁照翻佢斜咁磨佢，嚇就平嘅呢邊平嘅，呢邊平嘅咁。
你點樣知道係要幾？好似有啲人係好似咁樣，有啲人係好似咁樣，有啲人係。
你用慣咗個角度就係咁嘅啦嘛。嗱，用慣咗就係咁斜斜地嘅嚇，知道嘛？
你淨係用慣係先知道係一個角度啊？
通常係咁啦。你已經係用開就慣咗，一直係咁啦嘛。一直用開就慣咗就咁用啦嘛。嗱
，Can you ask him to estimate the angle？
佢話你可以估計estimate 即係估計，大約估計嘅角度係幾多？即係45度。
唔需要嘅，唔需要嘅。呢個就係你慣咗係咁，你就會知道係咁用噶啦。
So I come from an engineering background, and I tried really hard to get exact sharpening angles out of my dad. But as I've been doing more and more of these videos, I think something that underlies my dad's approach to Chinese cuisine is that it's all about the feel of it, and developing an intuition for what you're doing. I will say that a good starting point would be to hold the knife at about a 15 to 20 degree angle, which, as Kenji explains in his helpful video, you can estimate by taking the width of the knife, dividing it by 3 or 4, and lifting it up by that distance.
好似你呢啲刀咁樣，呢刀一樣啫嘛。你係兩邊係
呢個係
兩邊都係咁嘅，你咪按照佢呢啲刀冇咁講究，冇啲中國嘅餐嘅嗰個刀咁講究用嘅。佢兩邊咪兩邊咯，兩邊你一樣係咁啫嘛。如果佢太過唔利嘅話咧，你就用呢邊；如果覺得佢可以唔需要咁咩嘅，你就用呢邊得啦。嗱，佢就係斜斜地，咪斜斜地咯，係嘛？佢嘅口，佢嘅兩邊嘅口都係斜斜地噶嘛。你咪順翻佢兩邊嘅斜斜地咯。嗱，你一定咁樣嗱，睇住呢度，佢因為我呢都係直噶嘛，佢呢都係圓噶嘛，係咪？唔同啊嘛。嗱，呢啲就唔同啦。我就係直噶嘛，平噶嘛，但係佢呢都係圓嘅。所以你就順住咁，順住佢咁樣游，對嘛？順住佢邊咁游，呢邊就咁，得啦嘛？係咁啦。
你餐館邊有平時用呢個刀？
我通常我唔用呢啲刀，
就係呢個。
呢個。餐個個都要有把咁嘅磨刀棍喺度嘅，點啊？嗱，呢度呢邊，嗱呢度咧就保護你隻手嘅，呢度係保護你隻手嘅啫嘛，咁樣唔會斬你隻手咯，係嘛？呢度係保護你隻手嘅，嗱 咁就會嚟好多啦。咁
啊
嗱，仲有一個啦，
That's scary.
嗱
Very scary. It's very scary tonight.
嗱，我話俾你聽，你屋企都冇呢個嘅，亦都冇呢個嘅，你點辦啊？執不到碟梗係有啦嘛，屋企個個有啲碟係咪？反轉佢呢度
OK，
嗱，兩邊或者你呢邊就得。碟屋企個個都有啦，咁磨下佢就會連成唔同噶啦，
如果你成日用碟，會唔會整爛把刀啊？
唔會爛，把刀唔會爛。
會冇咁係咪冇？
但係你如果你成日用佢咧，你覺得就個都唔夠薄啦，唔夠薄咧，你一定係要用呢啲。屋企應該就已經夠噶啦，屋企冇咁多嘢切嘅啫，有幾多嘢切咧？係咪？好似你咁呢把刀已經切好多嘢啦，切到幾多嘢？有呢隻刀已經足夠噶啦。嗱，咁就得啦，係咪？得啦，嗱，你自己摸下，但係你一定要唔好咁用，咁樣冇用啦，快
哦，一定要快。
快壓住把壓，俾用大力壓住佢，咁先有用。呢個咁樣冇用嘅，你知嘛？一定要壓住把壓兩邊，呢邊撳力，呢邊撳壓住佢。你試下，嗱，你試下啦，壓住佢。唔係咁樣。
Oh, scared to like cut myself. 點解唔係咁唔咁啊？
咁樣都得，咁樣都得。
咁樣冇咁驚嘅，因為
professional like Eddie。
咁樣都得，但係仲係冇咁好力，咁樣壓住佢。你唔會整親你手嘅啫。嗱，有條棍喺度啊嘛。嗱，最多咪等住條棍呢度。
壓住即係
壓住佢，壓住佢。就算咁都唔會整你隻手嘅係嘛？係咪？啊，試下，試下，唔會整你手嚟。呢度有條棍，有個卡住棘住你嘛。大力啲，大力啲。
I'm like cutting it short because I'm like scared to cut myself.
Yeah.
Huh?
Wait,
Huh?
do you move the rod or do you move the
I
knife?
think you move the knife. 你唔係喐呢個，你喐。
嚇
把刀。
嚇，係咪？
There we go. Okay.
係咪？
Okay.
係咪？
Okay.
唔會整親你手嘅，因為有呢個喺度會保護你隻手噶嘛，唔會整你手嘅。
可唔可以試下呢個？
呢個嗱，你試呢個嗱，你攞個斜斜地嗱，呢個斜斜地攞個斜口嚟油啦嗱，攞啲水先。呢邊係粗嘅，咩都冇啦。
So 你開始係用粗嗰邊。
通常我係好耐先用呢次，好耐先用一次。嗱，你睇住佢放落個把刀，你自己摸住把刀係斜斜地噶嘛，係？但係你水推啊，你可以翻轉頭得噶，係咯。
你要做呢邊幾次啊？
你睇你把刀有咩程度咯？如果太過唔利嘅，你咪磨多幾次咯。如果覺得唔使咁耐嘅，你咪嗱翻轉啦，嗱翻轉呢邊就平啲嘅啦，嗱斜斜地嗱，啊點？嗱平啲，
要唔要？我因為呢度冇。
用咁咩？講呢邊啦，嗱呢邊呢個口嗱呢邊咯，係啦，係咪啦？嗱，好啦，你磨完呢邊啦，反轉佢啦，嗱，攞翻個刀鋒出嚟啦，嗱，嗱，就係咁，斜斜地要斜斜地，推啊，推啊，但係快啲， good。好啦，用呢種反轉嘅，平啲。係啊，係喎。係嘛？咁咪磨多個刀鋒出嚟咯。
咁即係有一邊係斜嘅，成日都係斜，一邊係平嘅。
斜地切嘅，佢嚿肉咧就咁反出嚟嘅。咁反出嚟嘅，知道嘛？如果你兩邊係平嘅咧，就冇咁反啦。你如果咁切咧，佢就咁切落嘅時候咧，佢嚿菜佢塊菜咧咁反轉嘅，順住，因為佢斜地啊嘛，佢順住咁樣反轉。知道嘛？如果你左手用左手嘅，你咪調轉咯。調轉呢邊平，呢邊兩個都唔同。你講專業啲就係咁啦，用屋企用嘅，我諗就個就求其咁磨嘅啫。
咁你一個年要用呢個磨刀石幾時啊？
一年或者係3-4次啦。
喺餐館啦？
餐館就兩日就一次，兩日一次㗎啦，切得多。但係呢條棍咧，一日就用好多次啦。
喺餐館？如
果餐館一日啫，就用好多次啦。
幾時啊？
你覺冇講嗰啲次嘅，你覺得佢係唔咩㗎？你咪又咁就切咯。切菜就冇所謂啦，切菜就求其唔使好利得啦。如果你係切肉嘅咧，切牛肉啊，咁你好似我切牛肉咁就切雞肉啊，切牛肉咁就唔同啦。要磨多要夠利先得咯。
因為呢邊係平，呢邊有。
你咪平啲咯。呢個可以平啲咯，呢邊係斜啲咯，一樣啫嘛。呢邊係斜嘅，你平佢冇用噶，磨唔到把刀噶，係咪？如果你係平，磨唔到把刀，磨唔到嗰度咯，係嘛？你一定要斜先攞嚟磨到嗰度啊，係嘛？斜地，順住佢斜地咁樣。
呢個把刀係咪都係30年、40年？
係啊，
兩樣啊。
係啊，我哋開華廚嗰時已經有嘅，咪開呢個餐館時有㗎啦。
大過你啊！一定要。
我餐廳買，仲有一把斷咗條柄掉咗啦，有一把唔佢係點樣斷咗啦？係我哋裝修屋嗰時咧，我嚟斬嘢，斬咗嗰邊買整嗰啲樹根嗰時咧，斬樹嗰時我嚟斬嗰條柄呢度斷咗，因為斷咗，嗰把仲係正式係斬硬骨㗎啦。仲厚嗰啲啫。
嗰把咧，即係 double use 嗰把咧，就係1987。
Wow, that's how old I am.
So be 1986 like that.
Wow.
And then the other one，嗰把淨係切菜嗰把咧，就係40年係嘛？
喺紐約，係啦，喺紐約帶翻嚟㗎啦。
That was 1981.
Wow.
From 1981 to now is almost 40 years. Soon 40 years. Yes. That's good. Right? 咁如果你而家呢把刀可唔可以切肉啊？
呢把都係切得肉㗎啦。我呢把都可以切得肉㗎。我呢把斬又得，切就得㗎。呢把刀兩樣都用得㗎。不過斬嘅時候就唔係用呢度，斬嘅成呢度。夠力啲啊嘛。我斬排骨唔係咁，用呢度斬。
如果用呢邊會爛，係咪會爛？
會容易啲崩咗，但係呢邊咧夠力啲重啲啊嘛。呢條咁樣冇夠力啊嘛。嗱，你試下，你試下，你學物理就知道啦。你試下用呢度好啲啦，呢度好啲啦。斬嘢係咁，呢度靠呢度，斬呢度咧就冇啦。斬嘢永遠都係下邊。下邊呢個叫做刀根，呢個刀根，呢個刀尖，呢個刀肚，刀尖、刀根，呢個刀肚。
可以俾成機睇啊。
嗱，如果呢個係個尖，呢個係隻根，刀根，呢個中間咧係肚。切嘢嘅時候唔用噶，唔同噶。呢個係一樣啊？一樣啫嘛。切有啲咁切，有啲咁切。如果你係切，譬如切啲蘿蔔絲啊咁樣，我可以唔使睇咁得啦。嗱，我唔可以就我唔使睇咁就得啦。係咁啦，刀尖、刀根、個刀肚。分開切，用嘅地方唔同，切咩睇用嘅地方唔同。
你洗把刀有冇 特別啲啊？
洗刀咧，你就要預防你自己整割親隻手咧，你就最好就攞塊嗰啲擦膠咧，嗰啲洗碗嗰啲膠咧，濕啲水咁樣抹一抹佢。我再抹洗刀都係用佢㗎。
呢個
啊，如果你把刀切完啦，你需要洗啦，嗱啲水
啊，OK，
咁咪最好咯，咪唔整親隻手咯，知道嘛？最好就咁樣啦，嗱。
It goes without saying that you should be using dish soap when you wash your knives, especially if you've been cutting raw meat. Just to add a few notes on dishwashers, I highly recommend against putting your precious knives inside of them for several reasons. By doing so, you create an unnecessary risk of injury, and it's just also terrible for the knife itself. My dad's specific knife has a wooden handle, which will eventually get cracked and waterlogged in hot temperatures. As for the blade, the detergents will dull the edges more quickly, and the metals are more prone to rusting. It's also bad for your dishwasher, since the blade can cut into the rubber coating on the dish racks, which can also lead to rust. Serious Eats has a great article with an extensive list and explanation of things you should avoid putting in a dishwasher, including any metal that isn't fully stainless steel, wood, anything with a hollow handle, and a lot more. I've included a link to the article in our description.
咁你認為買啲好即係話好特別嘅刀石咧，定係普通嘅刀石就得咧？
得㗎啦，你而家用開呢啲石足夠用啦。我餐館做咁耐都係唔算係咩特別，應該普通嘅啫嘛。呢啲都係。
Just 買 like a common
OK
for family cooking， 因為好似餐館咧，你成日都要磨啊，成日都要磨，你個刀石咧要好啲。
我一年都係咁用，因為刀石用幾次啊嘛。我切咁多嘢，我一年都係用幾次。我呢一把刀一年都唔磨得2次。
OK，
我係愛嚟斬骨，我就用下佢啫嘛，斬排骨啊，買啲排骨翻嚟斬排骨，我用佢啫嘛。但係我斬完一次，我未必係要下次用幾次都得嘅啫，唔係成日要磨嘅啫。
唔係你喺餐館咁切得好多咧，
冇錯啦，
咧就要成日磨。
我屋企唔需要成日磨刀嘅啫，我好多時都話用呢個碟啦。咁啦，我好多時用係咁碟，我嚿石一擺喺門口嘅，我有時唔想出去啦，咁我咪就用呢個碟，咁一路切得啦。好似你呢把更好方便。
咁你係咪如果你磨太多，係咪會整爛啊？
都唔會嘅，你切好多都會爛啫嘛。
你講夾把刀會唔會爛？
梗係唔會啦，你切得幾多嘢啊？你屋企切得幾多嘢？
我諗如果爛咧就係 cut bone。
除非你係斬嘢斬到即係病爛啫嘛。
冇實體咪要 cut the bone。
你諗下，我切咁多嘢幾十年嘅，你睇下啦，40年啦，磨到呢個邊呢個都變咗色啦，係咪？點解呢個變色？你知唔知啊？呢邊唔會咧，因為我哋做工要分得好清嘅仔，把刀切完梗係咁放嘅，梗係咁樣放嘅。點解咧？咁樣放得唔得？得，咁你有時碰埋咪整咗隻手。向外邊，刀口向外邊，咁你碰落去唔係整親隻手啦嘛。但係呢啲刀我哋啲刀利啦嘛，你唔覺意咁碰埋佢。
呢個係
stainless steel。
呢個係不鏽鋼，呢個就不鏽鋼㗎，唔生鏽嘅，所以我都永遠呢度就蝕咗，呢度冇。呢個美國出嘅應該係。
呢把刀係江門啊，江門啲刀係咪好靚啊？
係啊，江門雙坑牙啦嘛。江門係幾個 county 咯，咪個江門。嗰個地方出好多刀，係好 famous 啊。
咁你記唔記得呢啲字係點樣？
呢個係華式錘刀，下邊咧華式錘上邊就磨咗啦，係公司嘅名嚟嘅啫。呢下邊咧就華式錘刀，即係中國餐館用嘅刀。
即係Chinese knife。
Oh, okay. I thought it was something like special, or like that's a proverb.
Long live forever.
Yeah, like may you enjoy cooking.
而家60幾蚊張刀係咪？而家60幾蚊係咪？我哋以前買20幾蚊到。
我買20蚊啫嘛，like a few years ago. But now it costs $60.
Yeah. Some are more, even more expensive. 有啲係200蚊啊。
咁咪我通常唔需要咁嘅咩刀嘅，自己如果做唔需要，屋企唔需要，足夠啦。呢刀足夠啦。如果你屋企冇乜嘢，咁你呢啲刀都可以切得到嘢啦。除非你係好似斬嘢就剁唔到啫嘛。你要切嘢咁切番茄，跟住而家磨番茄你睇冇啊？冇啊知道啦。
唔係睇下你如果切好多嘢咧，你就要把好刀，好似喺餐館咁，
It's pretty sharp.
成日都切。
你好似切三文魚啊，佢使乜好利嘅刀啫？係咁得啦嘛。切雞肉啊，切啲pork chop啊，咁咪呢啲刀咪足夠咯。我都少用呢張刀啫嘛。我係斬骨啊，我就用佢。平時切嘢都係。
你有冇有時有乜用呢個？
唔使。
冇。
唔需要用嘅。我係譬如啲pork chop啊，咁我就用呢度。整鬆嘅，用呢度用。
OK， 咁有時用好似
拍啦，拍蒜頭咯。拍蒜頭，或者拍葱、拍薑啊，咁樣嘢嚇。我又可以用咁又得。總之你做開咧，你就識得點樣用張刀啦。因為我揸張刀揸咗幾十年揸刀，我就知道揸刀點樣用。點樣磨？即係通常我哋做切嘢嘅好錫張刀，唔係亂咁愛佢嚟斬嘢嘅。你知嘛？你知唔知啦？我嗰時喺我餐館做工啊，我一早翻去切咗40磅牛肉，用呢啲刀切啦。一早翻去切40磅牛肉，40磅。佢哋嗰啲線面牛肉，
真係牛肉啊！
隻牛肉一片切到又炒呢啲牛肉咧。媽咪，我先問你媽咪先至翻嚟餐館。
咁你第二啲肉咧？第二啲肉咧？
第二啲肉咪我今日切好多牛肉啦，聽日我就唔使切牛肉咧，咪聽日切雞肉咯。聽日切啲雞肉啦，我唔使切雞肉啦，我又切豬肉咯。
咁你一個禮拜切幾多磅肉啊？
生意好啲就咪切多啲咯，賣大約撈埋晒啲肉，起碼200磅啦。
算佢200磅啦，要有㗎啦。
切菜咧，好多菜要切，又要搣蝦啦，好多嘢做啊，做餐館。
Because we don't hire helper by the time, so anything cutting, cleaning, preparing, and cooking is all by Daddy. That's just like a machine running with both hands. And he has so many scars from after they cut his finger. So many. So you put the gauze on, put the bandage on, rub the finger, continue.
睇我啲手。
Do the restaurant business.
你都忍啊？睇到嘛？
你
睇到嘛？最切得多係呢隻手。
點解呢個手啊？
就咁樣切啊嘛。咁樣硬住張刀切啊嘛。
Let me see your hands, Randy.
My hands are spotless. I just type all day.
爹哋辛苦咪養大你同個家姐，咁咪你哋唔辛苦咯，係嘛？爹哋辛苦唔緊要啦，係嘛 ？OK。
Daddy using knife to raise the family, raise 2 kids, and then pay for the college, then let you guys finish school. So he's done. So right now you use your mouth.
It's the T word in mouse.
Keyboard to raise your family.
This is my knife now.
It's totally different. But usually first generation in United States, so we have to meet what we can do to continue survive and get better life and get American dream.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, is there something that like gives him the most joy to cut? Like when I see a garlic and I go like, bah, it gives me a lot of joy. Is there something he likes cutting that brings him a lot of joy?
切啲貴啲嘅嘢啦。
Instead of it's more expensive.
我應該慣咗啦，冇所謂高唔高興嘅。總之我平時煮嘢切出嚟煮俾你中意食嘅，個個食得開心我就開心啦。我最開心我就見到你哋笑，見食得開心，咁我就開心啦。
Thanks, Dad.
OK，乖啦，OK， 乖。OK.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you for sharing the knowledge for cutting. The whole family is lucky.
Yeah.
Because we never need to worry about when I wake up, what's for breakfast, what for lunch, what for dinner. When we have a party, who's going to cook? that will be Daddy Lau.
Yeah.